Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Carol Santamaria. Just this week, new hate-filled messages were found at CSUN, and CSUN students are taking a closer look at their safety on campus. Many students say they're concerned about several issues, including active shooter drills and walking alone at night. CSUN has just released its annual report showing crime is down on campus. Most notably, in the past 3 years, there have been a total of 8 aggravated assaults on campus. Burglaries are down 72%, car thefts are down 84%, alcohol-related incidents are down 50%. But it seems the campus is still struggling to reduce the number of sexual assaults and dating violence on campus, which went up last year. This year, CSUN has a new police chief, Gregory Murphy, who says he's ready to face these challenges. On Point's Tapia has the story.
Thank you, Carol. Our guest for today is California State University Northridge new Chief of Police, Gregory Murphy. Thank you, Gregory Murphy, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right into this.
Okay.
Yesterday, a message was sent from CSUN's president, Diane Harrison, that hateful messages were found here on campus. Can you tell us more about these messages?
Sure. We discovered some messages, and on our daily crime log, we always put the crimes that occurred for the previous 24 hours. We discovered, it was reported to us, some messages that were on some bathroom stall walls, something that we've seen here at at Cal State Northridge before. The bathrooms were located in our Sierra Hall, and while they proposed no threat to anyone, there were hateful messages, and that was the essence of the message that the president put out. We want to inform so that the full community understands the tenor of the campus, and that was the intent behind it.
In her letter to the campus community, President Harrison said these kind of messages are happening more and more on college campuses. Why do you think that is?
There's actually evidence that supports that. As a matter of fact, recently, and as recent as this morning, I was in conversation with a forensic psychologist who focuses on campuses around California, the nation, and he further supported that assertion. In that there is a rise on college campuses. I've communicated with peers that I have at other campuses, both in California and outside of California. And interestingly enough, yesterday when I contacted one, that peer informed me that they had had a similar incident just the day before. So, certainly that activity seems to be on the rise across college campuses.
Do you have any suspects yet?
No, we do not. As a matter of fact, that's why these investigations are often long-lasting, because the ability and potential to get a suspect of an individual who decides to go into a restroom, understanding that we're never going to put cameras in restrooms. They understand that they're operating in secrecy, and so inside of a restroom stall, to write something on a wall and then to come from that stall in a busy location, quite frankly, the potential of getting a suspect absent, someone confessing to doing the activity, is very remote.
And do you think this is more of a game that's going on or an actual threat? And if so, how can you tell the difference between these two?
We don't know necessarily the intent, certainly based on the graffiti that we saw yesterday, even to speculate the intent. You said a game or a threat. In this case, it was just hate language. So even when the case is there's a threatening language is used, you don't know if it's a game or an actual threat, and that's why you have to caution err on the side of caution and take it as seriously as you can possibly take it. You just don't know. And there was a recent case in California where a suspect was apprehended after doing a similar thing, and also after utilizing social media to send some threatening messages, in which the suspect had indicated that they were not serious, and the unfortunate thing is everyone else is going to take them fully seriously, especially law enforcement and especially the criminal justice system. And so it really puts the individuals in a very unfortunate situation if it's a game that they're playing, because unfortunately they're going to be the only person that thinks it's a game.
We're going to talk more about campus security and safety, but now let's dive into your background. Let's talk a little bit about that. In your time as an officer, what crimes have you dealt with in your past, and how will those crimes or incidents help you in bringing peace to our diverse campus?
So, in my time as a police officer, I have really dealt with a spectrum of crimes. I started off working for a municipality. I worked for the city of Los Angeles for a period of over 10 years. And in that capacity, I certainly have responded to and addressed a variety and spectrum of criminal activity. And having that experience set, I believe what's most important is the interactions that you have with people in doing so, and understanding the impact of crime on victims, and being able to try to really help the victims get to the place where they understand that there are resources, that there's support for them, that at the end of the day, the blame and cause is the decision of the person that decided to engage in the act. So and I've worked on 3 major campuses prior to coming to Northridge. So I believe that exposure has positioned me to understand the nature of a major campus environment, what many of the quality of life issues are, which are consistent with other campuses. And having that awareness, I believe, helps to accelerate my kind of getting my grounding here at Northridge.
So now we would like to turn over to CSUN students who have voiced their concerns and would appreciate if you address them.
Absolutely.
So let's go to our first CSUN student to hear what he has to say. Let's take a look.
Basically, just what are you going to do to make sure that all of the students here are going to be safe at all times? I mean, one of the things too is that, threats aside, there have also been the string of emails that we've been getting about sexual assaults and sexual misconduct happening on campus. So what's being done to counteract that? Is the new, are you, speaking to the police, chief of police, are you the reason why we're being more informed of these incidents happening? If so, why won't we being told about it sooner? And then if not, why do you think that there's an increase in a rash of these crimes?
I'm really not sure of the frequency of notifications prior to my arrival, but my position on that is to notify, certainly in compliance with the federal requirements, if nothing else, per the Jean Cleary Act as that goes. Now, I can also speculate that over the past 5 to 10 or 15 years even, the efforts to encourage greater reporting of sexual assault has certainly been a full-throated effort to do that by law enforcement, certainly on campuses. And so perhaps what you're referring to is the result of those efforts to get more reporting. And once you get the reporting for police agencies and universities to maintain their compliance, there will be notifications made. And it's about more, though, than just maintaining compliance. The heart of the issue is, quite frankly, what is the right thing to do? And we want to inform the community with the information that best allows them or provides them the ability to care for their safety. And so it's with that spirit that we lead first. And so understanding that there is an environment in which, these actions, if they're ongoing and they pose a continuous and ongoing threat, certainly, there's an obligation to let people know that so that they can take precautionary actions. And so that's really, the response to it. I really don't focus on the volume. You know, if they come in and there's a need to notify, then we simply notify.
There are students on campus that are not educated when it comes to an active shooter. So now let's go to our next two students who express the fear that they have about this matter.
I would have to say, in case active shooter, I really don't know what to do in case you're out in public if there's an active shooter. We were not taught that. There was an issue last semester, I was in the library, and there was like a fire alarm went off, and I instantly thought, oh my God, there's a shooter in the building. So I had no idea what to do. I'm like, do I pack my bags? Do I hide? Do I run? I think maybe if we were more self-aware of what to do, it would ease a lot more student range.
How he would respond in an incident like last winter when there was like a shooting threat going around, just what information he would make available to the students, like what the protocol for that would be besides just having police on campus, like how they would investigate it.
Yeah, those two very good points and question, or good point and a good question. So in the active shooter, you know, it's really a great question, and our training that we provide, there's a campus video that talks about active shooter. You know, since my arrival here, we've implemented a training program that I brought from my previous place. It's referred to as a CERT, and it's active shooter survival, escape, and reaction training. And in that, there's a cadre of department personnel that will, by request, come to a group setting. So, for example, you know, this unit here, if requested, they would come and they would provide the fundamental philosophy of responding to an active shooter, you know, first to make an assessment, then to quickly determine what you believe your best steps or alternatives are. It's consistent with run, hide, and fight. And, you know, so real quickly, I'm not going to try to train in this program, but we have that program available to come out. But the assessment is, if the best thing to do is run, then you do that. And if it's to hide and secrete yourself, then to do that. But lastly, and what I really put emphasis on is the fight portion, and quite frankly, to empower folks to have the will to survive. You know, it would be definitely a desperate situation, but you know, that's the time when I believe that you'll benefit by having a very strong will to survive, and whatever measures would allow you to overcome such a situation. And so our folks will train in that capacity when they come to the location, and you know, so please, you know, encourage your groups, your department head, or whomever, to seek out and get scheduled to have that, and we'll send folks out to do that training. As it relates to the reference to last winter, you know, there is a variety of responses, you know, that law enforcement can do. One is, you know, as articulated, you most likely will see an increased police presence in an environment. You know, so, you know, you can take a major event across the city. In recent history, after Las Vegas, after other large events, you'll see that at most events now you see an increased police presence. So that's just a standard protocol when you're anticipating a threat. So you know, that's going to be one thing that happens. What you don't see, and even, you know, in last November, what you know, the general population never sees, is the parallel investigative pieces that take place at the same time. So, you know, just because that isn't as visible as the patrol and uniform presence, there's always a multifaceted investigative effort being taken. And, you know, and even in last year's incident, there were multifaceted investigations, and by multifaceted, I mean involving CSUN, DPS, local municipality investigative arms, as well as federal investigative arms that are all collaborating and working in a coordinated effort to get at the suspect, any other potential collateral threats that might be occurring because of the primary threat. So those things are happening, and unfortunately, many times they're not as visible.
Statistics indicate there were 21 stalking offenses on campus and 4 on-campus residential last year. With that being said, another concern that raises an eyebrow is the safety in and around the dorms. We have 2 students who expressed their concerns on this issue. Let's take a look.
I live in the dorms, and I can tell this year people aren't really taking the security protocol too serious, so that kind of bothers me because I'm like, anybody can kind of walk into the dorms at any time of night. But on campus, there's a lot of people, so I don't feel like I'm pressured or I don't feel nervous. If that makes sense.
Probably have people patrolling around because so when I drive, they close the gates at a certain time at the gates, and they don't ask people for their IDs anymore. They just look inside the car. Okay, you guys can go. And I feel like you don't know who that person is that's driving in, so you should check who that is.
What is the basic protocol for security in and around the dorms?
Yeah, so the CSUN DPS assigns 2 police officers that their primary focus is our residential area, and those police officers, work to interact with the community there. They should be in a mode of soliciting what the issues are, and I encourage students that as you see those police officers in that environment, to also engage them in conversation about what concerns you have. You should never hold on to those concerns that you have about that, because the way that we can start to address those things is by first being aware of them and then coming up with measures to address them. The protocol that was mentioned, I especially like the fact that was brought up, because certainly in the residential hall that becomes critical, and that is a process whereby all of the individuals who live in the residential hall have to take a ownership of the security of their environment for themselves and for their fellow residents, and following the protocol that is set forward, such as pulling a door closed behind you, something that simple. Certainly making sure that you lock your doors when you go into your room. and I'll come certainly back to the residential hall, but it goes beyond that. Even in office buildings, this is a consistent theme. The protocol for safety and security. I've worked on universities with laboratories that have incredible value in their research, and the potential for contamination. And it's similar in the sense that the importance of the protocol becomes everything. And certainly there's nothing more important than the safety and well-being of our students that live on our campus. So that protocol and adherence to it is even more important. So I can't emphasize that piece enough. When it comes to checking folks at the gate and the door, I'm happy to hear that, in the sense that I now am aware of it. We on the campus, we have contractual agreements with various security companies, and in some cases, they're assigned to particular tasks, and unless we get the feedback like I've received, then we're unable to address it. So, with that feedback, that's something that, I'll explore further to make sure that those measures that we set in place are actually taking place, because if they don't, I agree with the student that, it defeats the entire thing. So,
with CSUN being an open campus, does it make us more vulnerable to outside threats compared to other universities you have policed?
So all of my experience has been at public institutions. So I've never had the opportunity to police in a private university or institution. Certainly after 6 years in the U.S. Air Force, which, although it's a public U.S. Air Force, the bases are private. And so my experience on being in a certainly a military installation that has extreme controls and protocol. You want to talk about protocol? If I compare anything to that, quite frankly, nothing measures up. But I have interacted and visited private universities around Southern California and the state. And, so there is an advantage in their ability to control, for example, access to the campus, whereas, on a public state university, it is a part of the community. It's an extension of the community. It's integrated in the community. And, and in that sense, there isn't necessarily an outside the campus. It's just a simple continuation of both the community in one sense, and then a continuation of the campus in another sense. So to get directly at your question, that does create a greater challenge to safety and security, because your measures to establish a boundary around the campus, they're not there.
And then moving to another topic, there are students who feel paralyzed when they encounter an uncomfortable situation here on campus. So let's take a listen to what this student says.
What to do if you become paralyzed, because some people just become paralyzed with fear and can't scream, can't react in any way. So what to do when that happens?
Well, that's really a great question to ask, and just so you know, it's not just students, it's all of us as humans. When we encounter a situation that puts us into a very fearful state, we've all heard of, fright and flight kind of thing, or fight and flight. But I think there's also a potential for freeze, fight or flight, because most people, when encountered with something that shocks the senses, certainly that instills a great degree of fear, it will experience a period of being paralyzed, as the student asked. And I'll go back to when I talk about the ASSERT training that I mentioned before. One of the biggest benefits of that training program, if we're successful, is it starts to cause people to formalize in their mind a variety of scenarios that are uncomfortable to even imagine. But in doing so, you start to think and process your way of negotiating through those situations. And by doing that, what the hope is that if you encounter a situation that is similar to that, you're a little bit ahead of the game. And because you've at least visualized it in your mind, you start to have some notion of how you might respond. And and I always use as an example when I get a chance to, imagine yourself driving down a busy intersection, and out of the blue, someone walks into the middle of the intersection with a firearm and just starts randomly firing into vehicles, and as you can best predict, they're coming your way. I suggest that think about how you would react to such a situation, so that if such what we would all call a crazy thing were to happen, the first time you're trying to identify, well, what am I going to do now? Hopefully you have at least in your mind thought about this to say, well, I've always thought if this happens, this is the action I would take. So that's one of the big benefits of the program that we refer to as ASSERT, and it's getting you to think about situations prior to they happen. When you walk in a room, unfortunately, in the world that we live in, start thinking about if there's an active shooter or there's an active aggressor that comes in this classroom, what will be my first step, second step, and third step? And and I encourage people to do that when you go into a restaurant or you go into a large event with your loved ones. Think about those things, and hopefully you never ever have to use it. But if you encounter an environment where you do, then at least you've got that mental step ahead.
What are your plans for the upcoming year to help educate and help our campus from potential threats?
Okay, so my process is three-pronged. I first look at what efforts we can take to prevent things. And secondarily, I look at what we can do if we are not 100% successful in preventing them. And then the next phase is what can we do to intervene. to mitigate the negative outcome of bad things. And if lastly we fail in those first two, what can we do to investigate something that has unfortunately taken place? And I think about this, you know, circuitously. So the next time, what we learn from our investigation feeds into our efforts to prevent and hopefully make us more successful at that. So with that being said, you know, I'm looking at bolstering, for example, the number of cameras that are on our campus in public places so that we have better eyes on the campus. Because as you mentioned earlier, it is a public campus, subject to anyone coming on. I'm looking at video analytics to be able to identify anomalies based on the speed of computations at a very accelerated pace, so that we can be alerted of things that get us into that arena of being able to intervene if something takes place. And you know, and staying in the mindset of video capability, is it also lends its benefits to the investigative phase of that cycle, because it provides us with evidence, you know, after the fact. So that's one aspect. Another aspect we're looking at is a variety of measures around access control that once again gets back to the earlier student's point about protocol, and not just at our residence halls, but across the campus as a whole. You know, so I first want to get eyes on the campus very comprehensively. Secondarily, I want to see that we have enhanced access controls, and then beyond that, you know, we're looking internally at some of our response techniques as a police department to better serve the needs of the campus.
Thank you. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Chief Murphy, for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you.
What are you looking for?
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30. You can watch us on Santa Clarita Valley Television on Sunday at 5, and on LA 36 at 4 on Thursday afternoons, and at 7:30 on Friday nights. For On Point, I'm Carol Santamaria.